describe, wouldn't even come close to describing what I felt. But you know what? Every day after that, I think of that song and I listen to that song, the Zach Williams song, "Fear is a Liar." Like Monica said, the devil uses fear, and it's just a tool of the devil. And that's just his attempt to try to tell me that I couldn't do this. That was his attempt to tell me that God hasn't called me. But I listened to that song and it got me through this. And so just pray for me today. Still a little nervous, but for all that God's done for me, this is the least I can do for Him. So I'm going to read a scripture today that's pretty familiar passage. And the title of my message is Trust and Obey. It's Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. And it says, "Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham,' and he said, 'Here I am.' He said, Then he said, 'Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and take him to the land of Moriah, and offer him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.' So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. He split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place in which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, 'Stay there with this donkey, the lad, and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you.' So Abraham took the word of the burnt offering and laid it down on Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the 2 of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, 'My father.' And he said, 'Here I am, my son.' Then he said, 'Look at the fire and the wood, and here is the lamb. Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?' And Abraham said, 'My son, God will provide one for himself, the lamb for a burnt offering.' So the 2 of them went together. Then they came into the place of which God had told them, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. And he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife and slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, 'Abraham, Abraham.' So he said, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me.' Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, 'The Lord will provide,' as it is said in this day, 'In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided.'" This passage, I've heard this story plenty of times as a kid growing up, but I've never really dove into this passage deeper. Abraham was a mighty, mighty man of God. And Abraham had prayed for a son for years. The Bible tells us Abraham was 100 years old when he had Isaac. So think how long that Abraham prayed for Isaac. And I've determined 5 lessons that I kind of want us to take away from this passage today. If you look back at verse 2, God said, "Take your only son, who you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." If God told us to sacrifice our only child, how would we respond? Think about that for a second. I love my son to death. I think if God asked me to sacrifice my son, I'd probably tell him, "God, you're crazy." Honestly, I don't think I could do it. I don't think that I would have that faith and that obedience like Abraham had. But Abraham he truly had faith in God. His faith was unwavering. He had an unwavering faith. And us as Christians, we should have that same unwavering faith. Would we obey God if He asked us to do that? Probably not. There's probably not a single one of us in this room that would sacrifice our only child for God. So then you kind of question yourself, why would God have Abraham sacrifice his only son? The son that he's prayed for years, the son that he wanted so bad. Why would God have him sacrifice him? And this is the first lesson. It's because it would be a far less test of faith if the sacrifice didn't mean as much. And the greater the cost, the greater the sacrifice. Let that sink in for a minute. When God tests us, this is a test for me to be up here today. But this is a real test of my faith, but, God provides. He's an all-time God, and He's really helped me make it through this. So let's look at verse 3. It says, early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 servants and his son Isaac. So to me, what sticks out in that verse? It says early in the morning he arose. So what does that mean? I mean, so he had all night to think about this. Abraham could dwell all night about having to take his son and kill him the next day. Man, have any of you ever been given an opportunity, maybe not an opportunity, but been presented with think about this. I had dental work done, and I absolutely hate the dentist. Hate them. I mean, it was a true thing to get me to go to the dentist and get this dental work done, but I had to have it done. And I had weeks to think about it. You know, I could have backed out of that. And sometimes we've been presented with things that we could have backed out of.